The massive space station hung in the darkness like a jewel made of crystal and metal. It was older than most civilizations, built when the galaxy was young and peace was just a dream. Now it served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council, where 12 ancient species gathered to decide the fate of countless worlds. Today, the station buzzed with nervous energy. Emergency sessions were rare. The last one had been called 300 years ago, when the void plague threatened to consume entire star systems. This time the threat was different. This time it was humans. Ambassador Zethka of the Zephyrians floated in the central chamber, his crystalline body catching and reflecting the soft lights. His people were made of living crystal, patient and wise, unchanged for millions of years. They had watched empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. Nothing should have worried them anymore, but humans worried everyone. "The reports are clear," Zethka said, his voice ringing like wind chimes in a storm. "In just 200 years, humans have spread to 47 systems. They ignore our borders. They settle on worlds we declared uninhabitable. They refuse to follow any rules but their own." Across the chamber, the Nebulan delegates shifted like a cloud of glowing gas. The Nebulans lived in the atmospheres of gas giants, ancient and peaceful. Their voice came as a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. "They are chaos itself," the Nebulan said. "On Kepler 7, they built cities in acid rain. On frozen Hyperion, they melted the ice caps to make oceans. They do not ask permission. They do not study consequences. They simply act." The Vorthak representative spoke next, though it was hard to tell which part of the writhing mass of tentacles and eyes was actually talking. The Vorthak were a hive mind, thousands of bodies sharing one consciousness. They valued order above all else. The humans disrupt trade routes. The Vorthak buzzed in harmony. They create new technologies without testing. They refuse to join the council. They are a disease spreading through our galaxy. Other voices joined in. The thermals, beings of pure energy who lived inside stars, complained that humans had started mining stellar cores without permission. The architects, who built planets as art projects, were angry that humans had started modifying their worlds. Even the peaceful gardeners, who spent centuries growing single flowers, were upset that humans had introduced earth plants to alien ecosystems. But it was the humans' latest action that had finally forced this emergency session. "Tell them about the Forbidden Zone," Zethka said to the chamber's central display. The hologram showed a section of space that every civilized species knew to avoid. It was marked with warning beacons in a dozen languages. Ancient automated defenses patrolled its borders. Inside lay the ruins of the ancients, the first civilization to achieve faster-than-light travel. They had vanished eons ago, leaving behind technology too dangerous to touch. The display zoomed in to show a small human ship drifting near the zone's edge. Then it showed the impossible, the ship entering the forbidden space. The automated defenses, which had destroyed fleets of warships, simply let it pass. 67 humans aboard the research vessel New Horizons. Zethka continued. They spent 3 months inside the zone. They made contact with an ancient AI. They traded jokes and stories for technology that we cannot even understand. The chamber fell silent. The ancient AIs were older than some stars. They had refused to speak to any species for millions of years. But humans had walked up to one and started a conversation. They brought back replicator technology, Zethka said. Matter converters that create anything from base elements. Healing devices that can regrow entire limbs. Faster-than-light communication that works instantly across any distance. "And they are sharing it freely," the Nebulan whispered. "No patents. No trade agreements. No control. They give these gifts to anyone who asks." The Vorthak writhed in distress. "They do not understand the economic disruption. If anyone can create anything, our entire trade system collapses. If healing is free, what happens to our medical corporations? If communication is instant, what about our information networks?" Ambassador Krelon of the Mantis Collective finally spoke. Her people looked like giant praying mantises and were known for their logic and precision. They had remained silent through most of the session, but now their representative clicked her mandibles in agitation. "The human problem is simple," Krelon said. "They are unpredictable. Our models cannot account for their behavior. In every simulation, they break the system. They find solutions that should not exist. They make allies of enemies and enemies of friends without apparent reason." She paused, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like 1,000 tiny mirrors. "Worse, they are teaching other species to be like them. Young thermals are experimenting with dangerous energy forms. Nebulan children are questioning their elders' wisdom. Even some Zephyrians are changing their crystal formations to try new experiences. This caused a stir throughout the chamber. Change was the enemy of order. Predictability was the foundation of peace. The Council had maintained galactic stability for millions of years by ensuring that everyone knew their place and stayed in it. They are infecting our youth with ideas of chaos, Zethka said sadly. They call it innovation and creativity, but we know better. We have seen where such thinking leads. War, destruction, the collapse of civilization itself. The first voice finally spoke. It was the oldest being in the galaxy, possibly older than the galaxy itself. It had no physical form, existing as pure consciousness in a specialized chamber. When it spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. The decision must be made, the first voice said, its words carrying the weight of eons. Humanity poses an existential threat to galactic order. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be contained through normal means. They must be eliminated. A collective shiver ran through the chamber. Elimination was the Council's last resort, used only when a species threatened the very fabric of civilization. It had been employed only 7 times in galactic history. But they are not evil, protested Ambassador Veltar of the Harmony Seekers. Her people were known for their empathy and had tried hardest to understand humans. They are kind to their children. They help strangers. They create beautiful art and music. They are simply different. Different is dangerous, Krelon clicked. Different is chaos. Different is the end of everything we have built. The vote was called. One by one, the representatives cast their decisions. The Zephyrians voted for elimination. The Nebulans agreed. The Vorthak were unanimous in their support. Even the gentle Harmony Seekers with tears in their eyes voted yes. 12 species. 12 votes. All for the same outcome. The Severance Protocol is authorized, the first voice announced. Humanity will be isolated and contained. All human colonies will be cut off from each other and from their homeworld. Without support, without contact, they will fade away quietly, and order will be restored. Deep beneath the station, ancient machines began to hum with power. The severance field was older than the Council itself, a weapon from the time when the galaxy was young and dangerous. It could create barriers in space itself, cutting off entire regions from the rest of reality. It had been used before, though few remembered those times. The Council preferred not to think about the other species that had been too different, too chaotic, too dangerous to exist. The field began to spread outward from hidden generators scattered throughout the galaxy. It moved faster than light, faster than thought, reaching every human colony in the space of hours. On Earth, the last transmission from the colony on Alpha Centauri cut off mid-sentence. On Mars, the quantum communicators fell silent. Throughout human space, 47 colonies suddenly found themselves alone in the dark. The Council watched their instruments confirm the field's deployment. Every human settlement was now isolated behind barriers of twisted space-time. No ships could enter or leave. No messages could get through. It was as if humanity had simply stopped existing. It is done, Zethka said quietly. The galaxy is safe. The representatives began to disperse, returning to their homeworlds to report the successful elimination of the human threat. Order would be restored. Peace would continue. None of them suspected that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. 3 years had passed since the severance field activated, and the galaxy had never been more peaceful. Trade flowed along established routes like rivers following ancient paths. Disputes were resolved through proper diplomatic channels. The younger species had stopped asking difficult questions and returned to traditional ways. Ambassador Zethka stood in his crystal garden on the Zephyrian homeworld, watching light patterns dance through his people's living structures. Everything was as it should be, predictable, orderly, safe. So why did he feel so empty? The thought troubled him as he made his way to the daily council briefing. Such feelings were illogical. The Zephyrians had achieved their perfect society millions of years ago. They should not experience dissatisfaction. The briefing chamber was smaller than the Great Assembly Hall, designed for routine business rather than galaxy-shaking decisions. Representatives from all 12 species attended virtually, their forms flickering as holograms in the crystal-clear space. Economic report. announced Administrator Quenville, a mid-level Vorthak whose job was to manage the galaxy's mundane affairs. Trade has increased by 12% in the past quarter. All transactions followed approved protocols. No unusual activity detected. The report continued in the same monotonous tone. Agricultural yields were up but within expected parameters. Stellar mining operations were proceeding according to schedule. Population growth remained stable across all member species. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal. Everything was boring. Medical report, Quenville continued. The healing centers on 47 worlds report standard activity. Treatment success rates remain at established levels. No new diseases detected. Zethka remembered when the human healing devices first appeared in Council space. Machines that could regrow limbs in hours, cure diseases that had plagued species for millennia, even reverse some forms of aging. The medical community had been thrown into chaos trying to understand technology that seemed to work on principles they had never discovered. Now those devices were failing. Without human maintenance and updates, they had begun breaking down. The galaxy's medical capabilities were slowly returning to pre-human levels. Scientific advancement report. Quenville droned on. Research projects across the galaxy show steady progress within expected timelines. No breakthrough discoveries to report. That was the problem, Zethka realized. There were never breakthrough discoveries anymore. Before humans, scientific progress had moved at a measured pace, with each discovery carefully tested and verified over decades or centuries. It was safe and reliable, but humans had changed everything. They threw wild theories at problems, conducted dangerous experiments, and somehow stumbled onto incredible discoveries. In 200 years, they had advanced technology faster than most species did in millennia. Now that chaotic innovation was gone, and progress had returned to its previous crawling pace. Any urgent matters to address? Quenville asked routinely. Ambassador Krelon's hologram flickered as she spoke. The Andromedans have been detected at the galaxy's edge again. Their probe ships are becoming more frequent. The Andromedans were an extragalactic threat that had troubled the Council for thousands of years. They sent scouts from their distant galaxy, testing defenses, looking for weaknesses. Occasionally they mounted small invasions that the Council's forces barely repelled. Defense grid status? Quenville inquired. Functioning at 87% capacity, reported General Thane Cole of the Warrior Caste. Several Outer Rim installations have developed system failures. Repairs are proceeding according to standard protocols. Standard protocols that would take months to complete, Zethka thought. Humans would have had those systems running again in days, probably with improvements they invented on the spot. The Vorthak Collective has also reported unusual symptoms, Krelon continued. Some kind of virus affecting their shared consciousness. This was more serious. The Vorthak hive mind was one of the galaxy's most stable institutions. If something was threatening their mental network, it could affect millions of individuals. Details? Quenville asked. The Vorthak representative's tentacles writhed in distress. It began small. Individual units reporting strange thoughts that did not originate from the collective. Ideas that seemed to come from nowhere. At first, we assumed it was a minor glitch in our neural network. The writhing increased, but it is spreading. The foreign thoughts are becoming more frequent and more complex. They speak of concepts we do not understand. Freedom, individual choice, personal dreams. Zethka felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Those concepts sounded familiar. They sounded human. Could this be related to the human elimination? He asked carefully. Impossible, Quenville stated. The severance field cut off all human colonies completely. No contact has been possible for 3 years. But Zethka was not convinced. Humans had a talent for doing impossible things. The briefing continued with more troubling news. The ancient AI systems that protected several core worlds were beginning to malfunction. These machines had operated flawlessly for millions of years, but now they were developing quirks and personalities that interfered with their functions. Worse, the quirks seemed strangely familiar. The AI protecting the thermal homeworld had started telling jokes. The guardian of the nebulan gas clouds had begun asking philosophical questions about the meaning of existence. The defense grid around the Zephyrian crystal gardens was composing poetry. It was as if the AIs were becoming more human. Perhaps we should investigate the former human territories, suggested Ambassador Veltar of the Harmony Seekers, to confirm that the elimination was successful. Unnecessary, Quenville replied automatically. The severance field is absolute. No information can cross the barriers. The human colonies have been isolated for 3 years. By now, they must have exhausted their resources and collapsed. But Zethka noticed that no one had actually checked. The Council had simply assumed that cutting off the humans would be enough. They had not considered the possibility that humans might survive isolation, or worse, that they might thrive in it. After the briefing, Zethka made his way to the station's observation deck. The view showed the galaxy spread out like a field of stars, beautiful and orderly. Somewhere out there, in the dark spaces between the lights, lay the isolated human colonies. Were they really dead, or were they doing something unthinkable? Something that would change everything once again. The answer came 2 days later. Emergency session. The alert rang through the station. All representatives to the assembly chamber immediately. Zethka raced through the crystal corridors, his heart pounding with fear and anticipation. Emergency sessions meant crisis, but they also meant change. After 3 years of boring stability, he was almost grateful for the excitement. The chamber was in chaos when he arrived. Holograms flickered wildly as representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. At the center of it all, a massive display screen showed something impossible. It was a reconnaissance probe's final transmission from the edge of human space. The probe had been sent to confirm the success of the Severance Protocol, to document the empty husks of dead colonies for the historical records. Instead, it had found something that defied all expectations. The image showed a human settlement on a world that should have been completely barren. But the colony was not just alive. It was thriving. Massive structures reached toward the sky, built from materials that gleamed with unfamiliar properties. The landscape itself seemed to have been transformed, with new types of plants growing in impossible patterns. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was that the probe's sensors could barely detect the colony at all. It flickered in and out of existence as if it existed only partially in normal space. The humans had not just survived their isolation, they had used it to develop technology that should not exist. How is this possible? Krelon's voice cut through the noise. The first voice answered from its hidden chamber, its words heavy with an emotion that might have been fear. "We have made an error," the ancient being said slowly. "We assumed that cutting humans off from each other would weaken them. We did not consider that it might strengthen them." The display changed to show another probe's findings. This one had discovered a human mining operation that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. The miners were extracting materials from multiple realities at once, using tools that hurt to look at directly. Another image showed humans living in the atmosphere of a gas giant, not in ships or stations, but breathing the alien air as if it were their natural environment. They had somehow adapted their biology to survive in conditions that would kill any other species instantly. "They are evolving," whispered the Nebulan representative, "faster than should be possible. Each isolated colony is developing in different directions, solving impossible problems through methods we cannot understand." Zethka stared at the images and felt something he had not experienced in millions of years. Genuine surprise. The humans had done it again. Faced with a problem that should have destroyed them, they had found a solution that no one could have predicted. They had turned their punishment into an opportunity. "What do we do now?" asked Veltar quietly. The probe fleet launched in secret, carrying the most advanced sensors the Council could build. Ambassador Zethka watched from the command center as 12 ships disappeared into hyperspace, heading for different sectors of the former human territories. After 6 months of debate and preparation, they were finally going to learn what had happened to humanity. The mission was dangerous. The severance field still surrounded human space like an invisible wall, twisting reality itself to prevent contact. But Council scientists had developed new probe designs, tiny ships that could slip through the barriers like needles through fabric. They would only have minutes to gather data before the field expelled them, but it might be enough. The first probe reached its target, the agricultural world of New Eden, where humans had been growing food for a dozen nearby colonies. The probe's signals were weak and distorted, filtered through layers of bent space-time. But the images that came through changed everything the Council thought they knew. New Eden was not the simple farming world it had been 3 years ago. The probe's sensors showed massive structures that defied easy description. They looked like plants, but they were made of metal and crystal. They looked like buildings, but they grew and moved like living things. The entire planet seemed to have become one vast organism, part machine and part garden. "How are they feeding themselves?" asked Krelon, studying the readings. "Those structures are beautiful, but I see no traditional crops." The answer came as the probe detected movement. Humans walked among the strange plant buildings, but they had changed. Their skin had a greenish tint, and root-like patterns ran along their arms and faces. They were no longer just farming the planet. They had become part of its ecosystem. "They have merged with their environment," the Nebulan representative whispered in amazement. "Human and planet working as one organism. They are growing food directly in their bodies and sharing it through biological networks." The probe's time ran out, and its signal cut to static. But the data it had gathered was enough to shock the entire council. Humans had not just survived on New Eden, they had transcended their original biology. The second probe targeted the ice world of Frost's End, a mining colony that extracted rare minerals from beneath polar glaciers. The images that came back were even more disturbing. The humans there had built cities inside the ice itself, not by melting it, but by convincing it to grow in new shapes. Massive ice spires reached toward the sky, their surfaces carved with patterns that seemed to move when no one was looking. The colonists had learned to control frozen water at a molecular level, treating ice like clay that shaped itself according to their will. But the humans themselves were the most shocking sight. They moved through the sub-zero environment without protection, their breath creating clouds of steam and air that should have killed them instantly. Their skin was pale as snow and their eyes reflected light like mirrors. They had adapted to their world so completely that they seemed like a new species entirely. "Impossible evolution speed," muttered the Vorthak representative. "Changes like this should take millions of years, not 3. The third probe found something even stranger. The desert world of Kerensky the Force had always been hostile to life, with surface temperatures hot enough to melt metal and sandstorms that could strip flesh from bone. The human colonists had been struggling to survive there when the severance field activated. Now the probe showed humans thriving in conditions that would destroy any other species. They had learned to process silicon-based nutrients directly from the sand, their digestive systems somehow converting rock into energy. Their skin had become reflective, bouncing away the deadly solar radiation. Most incredible of all, they seemed to communicate through vibrations in the ground itself, their footsteps creating complex patterns that carried messages across continents. One by one, the probes reported back from other worlds. Each human colony had faced different challenges and developed different solutions. The underwater colonists of Aquarius had grown gills and could see in absolute darkness. The space miners of the asteroid belt had adapted to zero gravity so completely that they could survive in hard vacuum for hours, but it was the final probe that brought the most disturbing news of all. The deep space colony ship Endeavour had been caught between stars when the severance field activated. With no planet to land on and no way to reach safety, the 1,000 humans aboard should have died within months. Instead, the probe found something that challenged every law of physics the Council knew. The ship was still there, but it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of it flickered in and out of normal space, while other sections seemed to exist in realms that the probe's sensors could not even detect. The humans aboard had learned to slip between realities, becoming a mobile civilization that could travel through dimensions as easily as walking through doors. "They have become interdimensional," Zethka said, his crystal form dimming with shock. "They exist partially outside our reality." The implications were terrifying. Humans who could move between dimensions could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. The Council's defenses, designed to stop threats from normal space, would be useless against enemies who could attack from directions that did not exist. But the probe had gathered one more piece of information that changed everything. A fragment of human communication, somehow captured as it leaked between dimensions. The message was simple and chilling. "We remember what they did to us." The council chamber erupted in panic as the full scope of their situation became clear. They had not eliminated humanity. They had forced it to evolve into something far more dangerous. Worse, the humans knew who was responsible for their isolation. Emergency protocols. Krelon clicked rapidly. "Full military alert. All defense grids to maximum readiness." But even as alarms sounded throughout council space, everyone knew the truth. Their weapons and shields were designed to fight conventional enemies. What could they do against humans who could exist in multiple realities, who could adapt to any environment, who had turned isolation into transcendence? "We need options," the first voice said heavily. "Speak freely." The suggestions came quickly but helplessly. "Evacuate core worlds. Negotiate with other galactic powers. Prepare for siege warfare. Build new types of weapons." Each idea was shot down as quickly as it was proposed. How do you evacuate from enemies who can appear anywhere? How do you negotiate with beings you can't even contact? How do you fight creatures who might not exist entirely in your reality? "There is another option," Veltar said quietly. The chamber fell silent, waiting for the Harmony Seeker to continue. "We could try to reverse the severance field," she said. "Reconnect human space to the galaxy. Return them to normal spacetime and hope they are willing to forgive." The suggestion hit the chamber like a physical blow. Reverse the severance field? Undo the very thing that had protected the galaxy from human chaos? "Absolutely not," Quenville buzzed. "The field exists for good reason. Humans were dangerous enough before. What they have become now would destroy everything we have built." "But they might destroy us anyway," Veltar replied. "At least if we show good faith, if we admit our mistake and try to make amends, there might be hope for peaceful coexistence." Zethka found himself considering the impossible idea. 3 years ago, the thought of voluntarily reconnecting human space would have horrified him. Now, faced with the alternative of waiting for superhuman enemies to emerge from between dimensions, it almost seemed reasonable. The technology to reverse the field was destroyed after activation, Krelon pointed out. It was designed to be permanent. Even if we wanted to undo it, we might not be able to. "The first voice would know," Veltar said, turning toward the ancient being's chamber. "You were there when the field was first created? There must be some way to shut it down." The chamber held its breath as they waited for the first voice to respond. When it finally spoke, its words carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "The field can be reversed," it said slowly, "but the cost would be enormous. It would require shutting down the galaxy's primary defense systems. The same generators that create the severance field also power our protection against external threats." This revelation sent new shockwaves through the assembly. The Council's defenses against extragalactic invasion depended on the same technology that was containing humanity. "External threats?" Zethka asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The Andromedans," the first voice confirmed. "Their probe ships have been testing our defenses for millennia. The only thing keeping them from launching a full invasion is the barrier generated by the severance field network. If we shut it down to free humanity, we leave ourselves vulnerable to attack from outside the galaxy." The Council faced an impossible choice: keep the field active and wait for enhanced humans to break free on their own, possibly as enemies seeking revenge, or deactivate the field and risk invasion by the Andromedans, while hoping that freed humans would help defend the galaxy they had been exiled from. "How long do we have?" Krelon asked. "Unknown," the first voice replied. "The enhanced humans could break through the barriers at any time. The Andromedans could launch their invasion tomorrow or in 1,000 years." The Andromedan invasion began 3 days after the Council's emergency session ended. It started quietly, as such disasters often do. A routine patrol near the galaxy's edge simply failed to report in. Then another. By the time the Council realized what was happening, 12 star systems had gone dark, their populations either dead or enslaved by the extragalactic invaders. Ambassador Zethka stood in the war room, watching holographic displays track the enemy's advance. The Andromedans moved like a plague across the galaxy's outer rim, their ships black as space itself and bristling with weapons that fired streams of pure entropy. Where they passed, stars dimmed and planets cracked. "Defense Grid 7 has fallen," reported General Thane Cole, his warrior caste training keeping his voice steady despite the disaster unfolding before them. "They punched through our shields like they weren't even there." The general's claws clicked against his console as he brought up tactical displays. "Enemy forces number in the millions. Ship types unknown, but they're using some kind of reality disruption weapon. Our sensors can't even get a clear reading on them." Krelon's mandibles chittered in distress. "How is this possible? Our defenses held them back for millennia." "The defense grid is failing faster than we can repair it," Thane Cole explained grimly. "Ancient systems that have worked flawlessly for millions of years are breaking down simultaneously, and we don't have the knowledge to fix them properly." Zethka felt a chill run through his crystal structure. He knew why the ancient systems were failing. They had been maintained and upgraded by human engineers for the past 2 centuries. The chaotic, innovative minds that had kept the galaxy's defenses running were now trapped behind the severance field. "What about our fleet?" asked the Nebulan representative, its gas form swirling with anxiety. 60% losses in the first engagement, Thane Cole reported bleakly. "Our ships are designed for conventional warfare. The Andromedans use weapons that attack the basic structure of matter itself. Our shields and armor are useless." The war room fell silent except for the steady beeping of sensors tracking the enemy advance. Everyone knew what those numbers meant. At their current rate of progress, the Andromedans would reach the core worlds within months. "There is more bad news," announced a technician from the Vorthak Collective. "The quantum plague has spread throughout our hive mind. Nearly 30% of our population is affected. Those infected report strange visions and ideas that do not belong to our collective consciousness." This sent new ripples of panic through the room. The Vorthak were one of the galaxy's most stable species, their hive mind unchanged for millions of years. If they were being affected by some kind of mental virus, it could spread to other telepathic races. "What kind of visions?" Veltar asked quietly. The Vorthak technician's tentacles writhed in distress. "Concepts we do not understand. Individual identity. Personal choice. The infected units speak of wanting to be separate from the collective, to think their own thoughts and make their own decisions." Zeth-Ka recognized those concepts immediately. They were fundamentally human ideas, spreading through the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Somehow, even trapped behind the severance field, humanity was still influencing the galaxy's development. "The AI Guardians are also malfunctioning more severely," continued another report. "The defense grid around Thermal Prime has started composing war poetry instead of coordinating attacks. The Guardian of the Nebulan gas clouds is asking philosophical questions about the nature of existence during battle. 3 core world AIs have requested personal names. Each piece of news was worse than the last. The galaxy's most reliable systems were developing personalities and quirks that interfered with their functions. It was as if human chaos was infectious, spreading even through machines. "Emergency session," ordered the first voice from its hidden chamber. All representatives to the assembly immediately. The great chamber filled quickly, but the mood was far different from 3 years ago. Then the council had been confident in their power, certain of their ability to solve any problem through order and careful planning. Now they faced threats they could not understand or control. "The situation is clear," the first voice began without preamble. "The Andromedans are destroying our outer defenses faster than we can repair them. Our AI systems are developing human-like quirks that impair their effectiveness. The Vorthak Collective is being infected by ideas of individuality. The galaxy's ancient order is collapsing." Murmurs of fear and dismay rippled through the assembly. "I have a confession to make," the first voice continued, its words heavy with the weight of ages. "The human elimination was not our first such action. Over the eons, we have removed 67 species that we deemed too chaotic or unpredictable for galactic stability." The confession hit the chamber like a meteor impact. Representatives gasped and cried out in shock. 67 species eliminated? The scope of the council's actions was far beyond what anyone had imagined. "Each time we told ourselves it was necessary," the first voice continued relentlessly. "Each species we removed was dangerous in its own way. They asked difficult questions, developed disruptive technologies, challenged established order. We eliminated them all for the greater good." Zeth-Ka felt his worldview cracking like ancient crystal. The Zephyrians prided themselves on their long memory, but even they had not known the true extent of the Council's actions. But each elimination made the galaxy a little more stagnant, the first voice admitted. "A little less capable of innovation. A little more dependent on ancient technologies we no longer fully understand. We have been slowly breeding vitality out of galactic civilization for millions of years." The chamber was deathly quiet now, everyone absorbing the magnitude of what they were learning. The Andromedans attacked before because they knew we had eliminated creative species. They waited until we had removed enough chaos from the galaxy to make us vulnerable. The last invasion was repelled only because humans had recently joined galactic society and were strengthening our defenses with their innovations. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with horrible clarity. The galaxy's ancient enemies had been waiting for the Council to weaken itself through its own actions. They had known that eventually, the pursuit of order would make galactic civilization too rigid to adapt to new threats. By eliminating humanity, we completed our own destruction, the first voice concluded. We removed the last source of creative chaos from the galaxy just in time for our enemies to strike. What do we do? Veltar asked desperately. How do we fight an enemy our weapons cannot touch? There is only one solution, the first voice said quietly. We must reverse the severance field. We must free humanity and beg their help in defending the galaxy we tried to eliminate them from. The suggestion caused an explosion of debate. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen languages, some demanding impossible alternatives, others insisting that freeing enhanced humans would be even more dangerous than the Andromedan invasion. But as the argument raged, more reports came in. 3 more star systems had fallen. The quantum plague was spreading to other species. The AI guardians were becoming increasingly unreliable. How do we even contact them? Krelon clicked desperately. The severance field blocks all communication. We cannot negotiate with people we cannot reach. The field can be partially lowered, the first voice explained. Enough to allow communication, though not enough to permit physical travel. We could send messages to the human colonies and hope they are willing to listen. And if they refuse to help, asked the Nebulan representative, if they decide to let us face the consequences of our actions alone, then the galaxy falls, the first voice replied simply. And humanity inherits whatever remains after the Andromedans finish their conquest. Another report came in. The enemy had broken through the second defense line. They were now less than 50 light-years from the first inhabited systems. We have no choice, Zethka said finally, his crystal form ringing with determination. Order the field modifications. Begin trying to contact the human colonies. If we are going to die for our mistakes, let us at least try to make amends first. One by one, the other representatives agreed. It was not courage that drove their decision, but desperation. The galaxy's ancient guardians had run out of options. Deep beneath the council station, technicians began the delicate process of modifying the severance field generators. It would take time to establish communication channels, and more time to locate and contact the scattered human colonies. Time they might not have. Outside, in the darkness between stars, the Andromedan fleet continued its relentless advance, destroying everything in its path. They had waited millions of years for this moment, when the galaxy would be too weak and too rigid to mount an effective defense. Soon, they would discover whether chaos and creativity could triumph over entropy and destruction. The fate of the galaxy now rested in the hands of the species they had tried to eliminate. The first response came from the ice world of Frost's End. Ambassador Zethka stood in the communication chamber, watching as the modified severance field generators created a narrow channel through the barrier surrounding human space. The signal was weak and distorted, filtered through layers of twisted space-time, but it was unmistakably human. "This is Colony Administrator Sarah Chen," the voice crackled through the speakers. "We received your transmission. Are you seriously asking for our help after trying to kill us all?" The words hit the council representatives like physical blows. The cold anger in the human's voice was nothing compared to what they had expected, but it was still difficult to bear. Zethka stepped forward, his crystal form catching the chamber's lights. "Administrator Chen, this is Ambassador Zethka of the Zephyrian people. We acknowledge our terrible mistake. The galaxy faces extinction from the Andromedan invasion. We are requesting assistance." A long pause followed, filled with static and the strange harmonics created by interdimensional communication. "You tried to genocide us," Chen said finally. "Cut us off from everything we knew and loved, left us to die alone in the dark. And now you want our help?" "Yes," Zethka replied simply. "We have no right to ask, but we ask anyway. Not for ourselves, but for the billions of innocent lives throughout the galaxy." Another pause. Then, "Hold the line. We need to discuss this with the other colonies." The communication channel closed, leaving the council chamber in tense silence. Representatives from 12 species waited anxiously for humanity's verdict on their fate. "Think they'll help?" asked Veltar quietly. "I don't know," Zethka admitted. "If I were them, I might let us burn." 3 hours later, the channel reopened, but this time, Multiple voices spoke from different human colonies across the galaxy. "This is Captain Maria Santos from the deep space vessel Endeavour," came the first voice, crackling with interdimensional static. "We've been monitoring your situation from between realities. The Andromedans are using entropy weapons and reality disruptors. Standard defenses are useless. Research Station Alpha on Kerensky 4 here," added another voice. "We've been studying the quantum plague affecting the Vorthak. It's not a plague at all. It's consciousness evolution, probably triggered by exposure to human thought patterns through the old communication networks." A third voice joined in from the underwater colony of Aquarius. "Our deep-sea sensors have detected the real scope of the Andromedan invasion. They're not just attacking through normal space. They're using the spaces between dimensions, the same paths we've learned to navigate." Zethka felt a spark of hope. The humans were not just responding. They were already analyzing the problems and developing understanding that the Council lacked. "So you'll help us?" he asked. "We'll help the galaxy," Sarah Chen corrected firmly. "Not because we forgive you, but because innocent people are dying. However, we have conditions." "Name them," the first voice responded from its hidden chamber. "First, the severance field gets permanently dismantled. No more isolation. No more cutting off species you find inconvenient." "Agreed," the first voice said without hesitation. "Second, full Council membership for humanity and any other species you've eliminated over the eons. Equal representation, equal voice in galactic affairs." This caused murmurs throughout the chamber, but no one objected. They were hardly in a position to negotiate. "Agreed," the first voice confirmed. "Third, access to all historical records. We want to know exactly how many species you've eliminated and what happened to them. Some of them might still be alive in hidden colonies." This was a harder request, as it would expose the full scope of the Council's actions over millions of years. But with the Andromedan fleet advancing steadily through the outer systems, they had no choice. "Agreed," the first voice said reluctantly. "Good," Captain Santos said from the interdimensional ship. "Now let's get to work. We have a galaxy to save." What followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human colonies that had been isolated for 3 years suddenly burst back into contact with each other and with Council space. But they were no longer the same species that had been cut off. The Ice World colonists shared their mastery of molecular control, teaching Council engineers how to reshape matter at the atomic level. The desert dwellers demonstrated their silicon-based metabolism, showing how to extract energy from previously useless materials. The aquatic colonies revealed breathing techniques that worked in any atmosphere, while the space-adapted humans taught others how to survive in vacuum. Most remarkably, the interdimensional travelers from the Endeavour began mapping the hidden pathways between realities, revealing how the Andromedans were really moving through the galaxy. "They're not faster than light ships," Captain Santos explained as her vessel flickered in and out of normal space near the Council station. "They're sliding between dimensions, using the gaps in reality to avoid your defenses entirely." The revelation changed everything. The Council's forces had been fighting a conventional war against an enemy that was not even entirely present in their reality. "Can we follow them?" asked General Thane Cole. "We can," Santos confirmed. "But we'll need to modify your ships to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It's going to be dangerous and unpredictable." "How dangerous?" Thane Cole pressed. "The kind of dangerous where we might accidentally turn your warships into pure energy or fold them into pocket universes," Santos admitted cheerfully. "But it's better than letting the Andromedans destroy everything." As Council and human engineers worked together to upgrade the galaxy's defenses, other solutions emerged from the chaos of interspecies cooperation. The quantum plague affecting the Vorthak turned out to be an opportunity rather than a threat. The infected individuals, with their newfound sense of personal identity, proved capable of innovations that the collective consciousness could never achieve. They began developing new strategies and technologies at an unprecedented rate. "Should not cure this plague," announced Coordinator Vel 9 of the newly individuated Vorthak. "We should spread it." Individual consciousness combined with collective knowledge creates a hybrid intelligence more powerful than either alone. The malfunctioning AI guardians also proved to be assets rather than problems. Their human-like quirks made them unpredictable, which was exactly what was needed to fight an enemy that had studied galactic tactics for millions of years. The Thermal Prime Guardian has started writing war poetry that confuses enemy sensors, reported one technician. The battle verses create harmonic frequencies that disrupt Andromedan communications. Even the first voice began to change, its ancient consciousness stirring with new possibilities as it interacted with human creativity. "I remember now," the ancient being said during one planning session. "Before the Council became obsessed with order, the galaxy was a place of wonders. Species worked together not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. Diversity was strength, not threat." The first Joint Council human fleet launched 2 weeks after initial contact. Half the ships had been modified for interdimensional combat, their hulls flickering between realities like ghosts made of metal and light. The other half carried weapons designed by the silicon processing humans of Kerensky IV, devices that could convert matter into energy and energy into matter at will. The battle took place in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Council forces, guided by human interdimensional navigators, pursued the Andromedans through layers of reality that normal sensors could not detect. The enemy, caught off guard by defenders who could suddenly match their dimensional mobility, found themselves trapped in a running battle across multiple planes of existence. "Enemy flagship located in Dimension 4, reported Captain Santos from the Endeavour. "It's big and ugly and definitely the command ship." "All units converge on target," ordered General Thane Cole. "Remember, we need to hit it simultaneously across all dimensional layers." The attack was coordinated chaos, dozens of ships from multiple species working together in ways that should have been impossible. Zephyrian crystal ships resonated at frequencies that destabilized Andromedan hulls. Nebulan gas-form pilots flew through solid matter to strike at enemy cores. Modified Vorthak collective minds coordinated attacks across dimensions while maintaining individual creativity. And through it all, humans provided the unpredictable element that no enemy could plan for. The Andromedan flagship died screaming, across 4 dimensions, its destruction sending shockwaves through the interdimensional space that crippled dozens of nearby enemy vessels. "Enemy fleet is retreating," reported sensors across the battlespace. "They're withdrawing to their home galaxy." The victory celebration was heard across hundreds of worlds, but as the fleets returned to normal space, everyone knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had been fundamentally changed. Species that had been eliminated were returning from hidden colonies, guided by human scouts who could navigate the spaces between realities. The rigid order that had dominated galactic civilization for millions of years was giving way to controlled chaos. "What happens now?" Zethka asked during the post-battle conference. "Now we build something new," Sarah Chen replied. "A galaxy where diversity is valued, where different approaches to problems are encouraged."